we do all we can to worship God in spirit and in truth. I'm Shawn McCraney, your host, and thank you, audience. That was just Mormon Tabernacle car is waiting for you. It was beautiful. Not you. All right. Hey, let's begin with a prayer. Lord, we pause. We thank you for life, and we recognize your hand in all things. And we seek to have your spirit with us. Help our audience members here and wherever they may be throughout the world, and people who might be listening tonight, that hearts will be softened, and we will walk in humility before you, and that's the goal, and love others. And we pray for this in Jesus' name. Amen. After 11 years of doing the show live, 7 of those years really going hard after Mormonism, and then another 4 or so going hard after religious institutions, had an opportunity to go down to Southern California and interview my parents. And so what we're going to do is we're going to see my mom's interview tonight and in their home down in San Diego, and then we're going to do my dad's interview in a couple weeks. And I'll just let it speak for itself. I'm really grateful that they were willing to do it, especially my mom. She's active, faithful, LDS member of the church. My dad, not so much. You'll learn about that when he comes on. But it might give you some insight into things. You won't believe, I don't think, my parents' story. It's quite unusual. Maybe not so much in their day, but still, even their day it was. So with no further ado, let's roll the tape. Now just know that we've done 600 hour-long shows, and we're tapping.
What looks best for the pose?
Being next to me. Oh boy, mugging for the camera already. Okay. After all the shows that we've done, I'm especially blessed to be able to do this interview with my mom and dad. We'll get into their support and love and the kind of parents that they've been over all these years, and unbelievable parents and human beings. So it's a real honor to be able to talk to them. I will let them explain their activity level as Latter-day Saints or non-activity level, but I wanted to start off by talking to my mom about how you met, how old you were, what happened, and kind of summarize that if you can for us, so that Dad doesn't have to go in and give those facts because he won't get them correct.
Okay, and when he's giving his side, will I be able to interrupt?
You will not. No editorial rights for you.
I was born in December the 26th, 1935, in Los Angeles, California. And growing up, I could remember being happy because my mother and dad were, my mother was home. She was a stay-at-home mom at that time. I had an older sister. She was 3 years older than I. And I remember that time as being happy, but then when the war broke out, must have been about 6, and my mother went to work. And she went to work at U.S. Rubber Company, and she worked the graveyard shift, so she slept during the day. So my dad was gone during the day because he had a job. He worked at Bullock's Wilshire in Los Angeles. And my mother slept during the day, so I was on my own. And when I think back about my childhood, I've been thinking about it more lately, I didn't realize I was really like a street urchin. I really was, because I was very young, and I would just go all over the neighborhood, and if there were kids, I'd play with them. And I had one friend, her name was Karen Willingberg, and her mother was home, and she had a nice home, and it was really clean. And in fact, it was so clean that the mother would make everybody wash their hands before they entered the house. But she was right on target. She had the breakfast, lunch, dinner, the whole thing. And hanging out there, I oftentimes would eat with them, and I played with her a lot. And she had a lot of nice things. I remember she had like a playhouse in the back and swings. And then I just go home afterward or wherever I wanted to go. And, you know, my mother instilled in me very early that if I did anything wrong, I mean, it was wrong. Right and wrong. And if I did anything wrong, it was my fault. It wasn't hers. I never ever thought that she was remiss by being asleep and letting me run around. But luckily, I never got into any kind of trouble. And I had our next door neighbor who actually owned the property that we lived in. Her name was Mary Simon. She was from Syria. And she was like an aunt to me, more than an aunt. She watched out for me and for my sister, who was 3 years older. And she introduced us to Mediterranean food long before it was popular. And she'd cook and give me things, and I'd eat lunch with Freddie, her little boy. I'm sure it helped her because I played with Freddie. He was a couple years younger, well, probably 3 years younger than I. And that was really kind of my childhood. Growing up, I remember some incidents. Mary was right on it. And I loved animals. And I had a dog named Sandy, who was part collie. And I loved her so much, but I think it was before I got Sandy. And somehow or other, I acquired a puppy. And I didn't want to let anybody know that I had it, so I put it in the laundry room, which Mary shared with me, with us. And so I don't know what happened to that puppy, but I wasn't allowed to keep it. And another thing that I remember about Auntie Mary was my sister and I would get in fights. And we'd yell and scream and hit each other and make a lot of noise, and she'd hear it. She'd come charging in. She'd say, "What's the matter with you two? Shame on you, stop that fighting, blah, blah, blah." And then after she'd leave, my sister and I would look at each other and say, "She's so nosy." We ran at each other anymore. We were mad at Mary. And then when I got a little bit older, I'm kind of skipping older, and we had a girl that lived across the street named Barbara. And she was 3 years older than I, and she got her driver's license, and she was driving, and it was during the summer, and she said, "You want to go to the beach with my friends and I?" And I said, "Yes, I'd like, I thought big time, I'm with the bigger girls." And we went into a dressing room at the beach, and they pulled out cigarettes, and they started smoking, and they said, "Do you know how to smoke?" And I said, "Yes." So they gave me a cigarette, and they lit it and everything, and then they watched me, and then I just took a puff and blew it out. And they said, "That's not the way you smoke. You have to take a puff, and before you blow it out, you have to do what they call inhale. You have to go." So I did that, and oh my gosh, I thought I was going to die. I coughed and got really sick. So at that point, I thought, I've got to teach myself how to smoke so that I can look more, look older. And my mother and dad both smoked, so there were always cigarettes in the house. So I just smoked during the day, taught myself. I became very proficient at smoking at 11 and a half. And and so one day on the way to school, by then I was in junior high, it must have been 7th grade, because I was walking to school and Mary spotted me smoking. So she told my mother. I saw that, oh, by the way, my nickname was Tiny Lou, which I did not like, but I saw Tiny Lou and she was smoking on the way to school. And I said, "No, I wasn't. I just lied through my teeth." I said, "It must have been someone else, Mary. It wasn't me." And she says, "Tiny Lou, I know who you are. I know you. It was you." So I got into trouble for that, but it didn't stop my smoking. And fortunately, I did quit when I joined the church at 21. But my friend, Barbara, that turned me on to cigarettes, she died fairly early with lung cancer. And I know I would be dead today because I enjoyed it and I smoked over a pack a day at that time. So that was one of the nice things about joining the church. I quit doing that. So come to the time when I met Dad. I guess I was even smoking by the time I met him. But anyway, my mother and his aunt worked together at a job at U.S. Rubber. And my mother became acquainted with his aunt, and she took in ironing too. So my mother would take our ironing over to her, and she brought me with her. My husband was there. He was 15 at the time, and he was there with his cousin Lee. It was the boy that lived there. And anyway, we got to talking and laughing and everything. And I thought he was cute, but my mother fell in love with Eddie. She said, "Oh, Eddie is so cute. But poor Eddie, his parents were in jail at the time because they neglected him. They weren't home, and the neighbors reported it, and they put him in jail for it. So he had to go live with his Aunt Polly and Uncle Al. And so anyway, my mother would say, his parents left, and, he should say, make me kind of feel sorry for him. And pity is akin to love. You feel sorry for somebody like that. And he was cute, but I wasn't really up to being with anybody. And so he wanted me to go to a performance where Bob Hope was at his high school.
That's him, by the way, who refuses to be quiet. Continue.
Anyway, he got tickets to go to that, and he wanted to take me, and I did not want to go. So I was with a girlfriend, and I have to get a backstory on that. Both of us thought we could sing really pretty, and we saw an ad in the paper to come down to Hollywood for, auditions. So we went down there, and I remember I sang, "I Want a Sunday Kind of Love." I don't know why, but I thought I could sing that really well. And they said, "Come back in about 5 years," But anyway, I got back and it was dark. I thought, I'm good. He's not there. I walked in and there he sat. He was all dressed up really nice and everything. And I still had my clothes on that I went to school in. And my mother said, "Oh, shame on you. Eddie's been sitting here waiting for you. And you're late. And you get ready, young lady, and you go with Eddie." So anyway, I went with Eddie. And, when you're only like 11 or 12, you like boys, but you like them at a distance, and so on the way back, he wants to start kissing, So when we got home, I told my mother, he tried to kiss me, and my dad said, "That's it, Catherine." Once in a while, he put his foot down. "You are not going to force her to go do this anymore." That was terrible. So anyway, Eddie decided to go back with his mother when she got out of jail. So he left and went back with his mother. And a couple of years went by, or a year, I don't know how long. But anyway, I had a girlfriend. It was during the summer, and she was staying with me. And we were somewhere. We came home, and my mother said, "Eddie called, and he wants to know if he could take you on a beach party." And I said, "Well, she has a friend here," and he said, "Well, I have a friend. I'll bring him." So anyway, she says, "Why?" I told him, "You go," and I didn't want to do that. But anyway, he came in, and he had changed. He'd turned into a bad boy. So that became very intriguing to me.
He changed, huh?
Yeah. He had his pants real low, and he had his hair in a ducktail, and he looked really bad. So I thought, man, I have matured, I've grown up, and I've got this nice bad boyfriend. So that's when we started getting serious. And he, we'd come, and then we'd do things, and my mother would let us sit out in front of the house and in the parked car after we went out, because she says, I don't want you parking anywhere where you might get in trouble, so just park in front of the house. Well, that didn't really help, but she felt comfortable that I was there in the car in front of her house. And my mother would do everything to help Eddie, and she would let him use her car. And so I remember we went to a party at some people's house that he knew from school and everything. He took me there. And then he proceeded to kind of ignore me and dance with the girls and doing all of that. And so I got mad, and I went and I sat in the car and waited for him. And he didn't come out for I don't know how long, and he finally came out. So that was a fight, but I didn't tell my mother, and I just kept it under my hat. So she had no idea how bad he was. And, but anyway, we got more and more involved, more heavy petting, me feeling guilty about it. And then we'd say, well, we're going to get married. He'd say, we're going to get married, we're going to get married. And we'd talk about things, and he'd say, we'll have 6 children, yeah. And we did. Well, but anyway, where I'm going with it. Oh, my girlfriend and I, we decided that we were going to run away. He with his friend and Eddie and me, and get married. And so we started to try to go around. We didn't have any money or anything, and we were going around trying to borrow money from people. He was going to his cousins and everything, and his cousin said so anyway, my mother found us. It was at my girlfriend's house, and she said, oh my gosh, you can't go see Eddie anymore. So, yeah. Oh no, she didn't say that. She said to Eddie, do you love her? I remember her telling me that. And you're going to get married. So she said, well, if you're going to get married, then I'm going to have a shower, and you're going to get married. And I'll take you to Arizona to get married, because we couldn't get married here. I was only 14. And so anyway, how did that go? I remember my dad crying, and I never saw him cry, and he was just broken down in his bedroom just crying, and I just said, Daddy, don't cry. And he said, you need to finish your education. It's so important. And I said, I promise you, I will finish high school. I promise you. So anyway, my mother went with us to Arizona to get married. And when we went there, we got married, and then we drove. Well, I have to tell you that Eddie had worked at U.S. Rubber. Oh, I've got to go back up a little bit. Eddie always had a wonderful work ethic. Even when he was down and out, he knew he had to earn money for himself because he couldn't get it from his parents. And he worked all the time, and he had a job. And he was delivering cars from the dealer, from where they'd get them to the dealer. And he saved up his money and bought me an engagement ring. And he went to pick me up from junior high, and he said, would you marry me, and gave me the engagement ring. So I had a nice engagement ring, and it was about a 1/2 carat. It was a nice size. It was very pretty. And I remember the friends that we had that got married young, they were all paying off their wedding rings, because they had to get them on credit. So that was very impressive, And the thing that had happened to really precipitate us getting married was that his dad had kicked him out of the house. He was just 18. Well, prior to that, when he graduated from high school, he wanted me to come to the graduation, and he didn't even have a coat to wear. So he wore my dad's coat for his pictures and everything. And I was the only one that was at his graduation, his high school graduation. And that tells you something about my husband, is that he knew he needed to get his education, and he graduated from high school, and I went to the graduation, and I was the only one. His parents were drunk. So after that, his dad told him, "You're 18, get out of the house." He kicked him out. He didn't really have anywhere to go, so he went to his aunt again that he stayed with when I met him. And anyway, he had a grandma that rented part of her house out. And so I can't get in his head, but from what I think is that he knew that we could rent that part of the house, that she had the bedroom and a bathroom, and we shared a bathroom. But anyway, we were in the front part. And so she said, "Yeah, you can live there." So we went to Arizona. We he hadn't slept the night before because he'd worked at U.S. Rubber, drove all the way to Yuma, Arizona, got married, and turned around to come back because my mother said, "I'm not going to be around when they consummate the marriage in a hotel. I want to go right home." So they drove all night and got home, and he was, I'm sure, completely tired, and I didn't know what to expect. We got into our house after we dropped my mother off, and it must have been 2 or 3 in the morning. And the first thing he did was expel gas, really loud. And he looked at me, he says, "I've been dying to do that all the while we were going together." And I thought, this is what I'm in for.
Oh my God.
It was terrible. That turned out to be a nightmare, living in the front of the house where his grandmother, because she would come in and snoop around when we were gone, and she was constantly on me for something. And he worked nights, he would come home in the morning and he'd want to go to sleep. So he'd say, "Let me sleep until 1 or 2 in the afternoon or whatever." And then I'd go in to wake him up, and he'd say, "I'm tired, don't wake me up." So I would sit in the kitchen with a radio, and I didn't have anywhere to go. And, and I'd sit there, and he got mad because the radio was making too much noise, so he took the tubes out of the radio, so I couldn't do anything. And so I'm sitting there, and I looked out the window one day, and I saw this girl going down the street. And I thought, well, that's a girl that I knew from junior high. That's a girl I knew from elementary school. So I went out, and her family had moved just a couple of blocks away. So that, to me, like it was divine intervention. I had somebody that I could kind of visit with and everything. Because he needed his sleep, and I had nowhere to go. I didn't drive. I didn't have a car. All I had was that grandma that was on me all the time. So anyway, I got pregnant with Kathy. I remember him saying, "Pray." Even though he said he didn't believe in God, he said, "We pray that you'll have a baby." He wanted to make sure he was working right. So anyway, that prayer was answered, and I got pregnant. And we knew we had to move away from Grandma's house, which was good. But during that time, one of the things that are funny, and I'm sure he'll tell you about it, is that he used to he used to read the labels on things and make sure he got bought in the bulk, which was crazy for 2 people. But you get more and you pay less, blah blah blah. So we bought a whole ham, and 2 people. We didn't even have a refrigerator, but we had an ice box, so we'd keep it in the ice box. But got kind of tired of eating that ham, especially when I sliced it one day to fry it up, and I put salt on it. So anyway, after I got pregnant with Kathy, I knew that we knew we had to move. So we found a place in Montebello. It was fairly close to my mother and dad's house. I did walk there one time with Kathy. And it was a small place, but the landlords that lived in front of us were very nice people. And, they were very accommodating to have us live there. And then when I went into labor, we didn't even have a phone. I don't even know my mother was there. But anyway, I went into labor, and I guess my friend, how she got there, and then my water broke. That's what happened, and I went into labor, and then they said you could call the doctor, and so he had to go to our landlord's house to use the phone to call the doctor, and the doctor said, bring her to the hospital right now. So he came back, and we were sitting there, and they said, what did he say? And Dad said, I don't remember. So he had to go back. He had to go back and call again. And the doctor said, bring her to the hospital. So I got to the hospital, and with my mom and was there, and my husband, and they said, take off your rings and say goodbye to your mother and your husband, and you won't see them until after you have the baby. And I said, I don't want to take my rings off because we wished them on, but I had to. She says, we don't know, you might have to have blood transfusions, and your hands would swell, and well, that's nice. I was no more prepared to have a child than anything. No one told me anything. In those days, they didn't tell you anything. You just went in and experienced it. But my mother, and I remember this lady, Mary's sister, saying, oh, it's so easy now. It's not hard to have a baby. You'll just go in, and they'll give you a shot, and then you'll sleep, and then you'll wake up, and you'll have the baby. I thought, well, that sounds okay. So I got to the hospital. Lucky again, divine intervention, I had a woman in the labor room next to me, which was kind of unusual. She'd been there a while having false labor. And I'm there, and I'm waiting, and I could hear these women moaning and crying and everything, and it was a lot of Mexican people and black people in there. And the Mexican people, when they were in labor, they would go, ay, 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 ay. And the black people would go, Lordy, Lordy, Lordy. and I said, what's wrong with you people? And she said, honey, you are going to experience pain like you have never had before. I'm really, yes, you are, So then, the doctor gave me castor oil because I hadn't started my labor hadn't started. And so then when it started, Dad and my mother went home and said, call when you're ready to deliver. So I'm there, and about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm having bad pains. So I called them. I said, you better get down here because I'm going to have this baby. So they came down, and then I didn't deliver her until 3:16 in the morning. But that was something, because I remember, I remember they gave me a shot, and it dried my mouth out. And I'd say, I want, water. They'd say, you can have a little ice chip. You can't drink water. So, and I keep saying, when am I going in the delivery room? When am I going? Because I knew that's where I was going to go. And he'd say, just in another while. And then I'd ask again. And then I remember saying, I'd rather be in school.
Yeah.
So anyway, then I had the baby, and she was so pretty. I thought she was awfully pretty, and went back to my room. And then when they came in to see me, they looked so odd. I thought, what's wrong? Why are they looking funny? And I said, isn't she cute? And they looked at each other and they said, yeah. The thing was, she looked just like my mother-in-law. She does today. She looks like Viola. But she was so cute. And so anyway, come to find out, because she was in the birth canal for so long, she had the really cone head. I mean, it was just really bad. And my mother, she didn't know what newborn babies looked like. She only had my sister and I. And she got Dad so upset because she says, "Oh, Eddie, there's something wrong with that baby. She's got a cone head." So, so anyway, when they came in to see me, I thought, why are they acting that way? She's cute, and they're looking at each other like she doesn't know. And so anyway, after that, when the doctor came in to see me, he was mad, and he said, "There's nothing wrong with your baby." And I said, "I wasn't aware." With a little molding, that'll go down, and she's just a wonderful baby. So then I found out why, they thought that.
Mom, move us ahead. You have the next child, Jeff, then you have Shen, then you have Shawn, then you have Bridget and Bo. At what time and how did the missionaries come to you, and what was going on in your life and with Dad and with family, and what were you thinking, and who were they? Go ahead.
Okay, at that time of my life, I had Jeff. He was about 2 at that time, and I don't know what happened, what I ate or what happened, but I broke out in hives, just terrible. And if you've ever had hives, I'm sure most of us have experienced that. But it got so bad that my lips were swollen, everything. And I was just praying. I mean, I always prayed. And I remember praying, "Please, help me get over this and everything," and blah, 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 blah. So one day, there was a knock on my door, and it was 2 lady missionaries. They were retired ladies. They were widows, both of them. And they told me who they were, and they'd like to come and talk to me. And so I said, okay. So they came in, and we started to talk, and and I even smoked in front of them. I said, "Well, do you mind if I smoke?" And they said, "It's your house, you do what you want." So they started telling me, teaching me. And when they got to the point of my Father in heaven being a loving God, and sending his Son to atone for anything we'd ever done, and that we would all be saved. I mean, that really resonated with me, because I just had a lot of guilt feelings in my life, and I thought, gee, that's beautiful that we have more and more chances. And of course we believe that you have chances even after you're gone. To go to a higher kingdom. We were taught about the 3 kingdoms, and even saying that the lowest one was so great that you'd commit suicide to go there. And I thought, well, gosh, this was the first time I thought of God as being a loving God. I thought of him as being a punitive person, saying, you're not going to make it,
Out of curiosity, was that a punitive idea of God because of how you were raised? Did Grandma and Grandpa teach you that, or you hear
No,
that
they
along
taught
the
me
way?
that my mother and dad, my dad didn't say much about religion. My mother taught us to pray. And so of course all I could pray that time was, "Now I lay me," and but they didn't. She said she took us to church, the congregational church.
Oh.
That's what she belonged to, and she took us to have me christened or baptized. And it was on an Easter Sunday, and it was a Methodist church, is what she said. And they said, the preacher said, "Well, look at all the people that are here today. You just come on Easter Sunday and you'll never come back." And that insulted my mother. So she never took us back. But the reason that I thought about religion at all, going back to my childhood, is we moved across the street from a Salvation Army church. And my sister got very much involved in that religion. And so this was where I got the punitive stuff, because at night she'd read like Revelations, and she'd read all these really scary things out of the Bible. And the one thing that she said was, "Mom and Dad are going to hell." I said, "Well, why would they go to hell?" Because Mom was divorced before, And when you can't go to hell. You go to hell if you were divorced. And I thought, that's terrible. My mom and dad are going to go to hell, you know. And everything that she said that could cause you to go to hell, I felt like I was guilty. So that's why I felt that way. And I had a lot of guilt feelings because of the petting that your father and I did as young people. I thought that was something that needed to be corrected and everything. So I felt that way. And then I finally felt like I had a loving God, a loving Heavenly Father. And that resonated with me, and I joined the church. What else now?
Just want you guys to just consider what's being said here. I mean, this was the gospel message. God so loved us, he sent his only begotten son. That resonated to my mom. And over the hellfire and brimstone, everyone's going to hell bit that the Salvation Army, you know, good people, but that's what they're pitching. And that resonated to her heart through LDS missionaries. She hears this and she joins the church, right?
Yes.
Dad didn't join with you?
No, he didn't join with me.
How did he take the news?
He didn't mind my joining. They interviewed him and asked him, because I think if he said, I don't want her to join, they probably would have said no. I don't know what they would have said, but he said she can join. And so he didn't come to my baptism, but my mother did come there. And the first thing that the thing that I remember about my baptism more than anything is they were singing the song, "Oh My Father." And I had never heard the concept of a loving mother. Part of the song is, "Father, Mother, will I see you?" And that wasn't anything that I was aware of that was in the belief. But anyway, that made me question a little bit about that, because I didn't know about that belief. But I got baptized, and then at that time we had to go to church 3 times a day. They'd have priesthood in the morning, and then they'd have Sunday school, and then you'd go back at night for sacrament meeting. And so even though he had agreed to let me be baptized, when he found out I had to go back at night for sacrament meeting, he didn't like it. He says, "I'm only here on the weekends, and you're not going to be, So I knew that was a requirement, that you had to go to sacrament meeting. So I told the bishop, I said, my husband doesn't want me to go to sacrament meeting, and I know that it's a commandment, or I should be going. And he said, you do what your husband says. Your husband is the head of the house, and you do what he says, so don't come. And I told him that, and that impressed him, because he thought, well, they're going to back me up rather than trying to pull her away. So then we started having missionaries come to visit Dad, and there were a couple of young missionaries. One was from England. That's odd, but he was a very nice looking young man, and that resonated with Dad. He was able to relate to those two. And then after that, he had several other missionaries, and finally joined after about 2 years.
Okay.
And so now we're at that point.
So let's shift into now your views, because I'll pick it up with Dad.
Yeah.
He's joined.
Yeah.
So the things you loved about it, what it did for your family, what it did from where you and Dad came from, and the things that you can express about why you stuck with it. And I just want to say, and my mom can correct me, but these are very loyal people. They, I think my mom has said this numerous times, that the church or the religion you're in is kind of like the marriage you're in. You're going to be in it, and you're going to be faithful to it, and you're going to see it through, good and bad. Like you don't get married and just toss it out when it gets bad. Well, they haven't done that with each other, obviously. So they also, I think, brought into, when it comes to her faith, at least my mom, going to stick through the good and bad. So tell us about the good and bad, if you want, about what it's done for your family.
All right.
And your views about God and Jesus, if you would.
What it did for me were so many good things, but I had these 2 children, and I thought, I am not equipped to raise children. I'm uneducated. I knew I believed in God. I wanted them to have a belief. And I saw the programs in the church and how good they were for the, for youth all the way through teenagers years and everything. And the missionary program, which the missionaries came to my home. And I saw only good, only good. And so I joined the church. I told you about my baptism. I told you about Dad. And the first job that they gave me, which was funny, was in primary. And I was told, that you would get a calling and that, you should do what was required in the calling. So they put me in with these boys that were rowdy as heck. Nobody had ever, and they were funny because as soon as I got in the class, one of them said to me, "You're the third teacher we've had because they don't like us," and blah, blah, blah. And so, I was sitting there and they were kind of making noise and raising Cain, and the primary president came in and said, "Shame on you, she's new, blah, blah, blah." They took me out of there, which was good because I moved with these teenage boys. Well, they were teenage, they were preteen because they were older in the primary. And so then they let me teach the sunbeams. So that was nice. And I had never taught anybody anything before, and I didn't know how they respond, but I remember having the lesson and trying to teach them, and they're looking at me and I think I'm really getting to them. Then finally they'd say, "What time is this over?" Oh dear. But anyway, the little primary class, and I loved primary. I loved the songs. I loved to see the children learn from the singing and from what went on in primary. And I knew that they were being taught good standards and good things. And I loved it. And then I had several other jobs in the primary. I don't remember what all they were. And I was also made a visiting teacher. And at that time, they had what they'd call a penny drive. Do you remember that, the penny drive? Mm-hmm. And then we'd have to go around and collect pennies and encourage the kids to bring pennies, and we'd make big posters and with their names on it. And I didn't like that because I didn't like to try to solicit anything at the time. But they, after a while, they did away with the penny drive. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they got complaints or what, but that was one of the things that I remember about being in primary. Mm-hmm. And then I went on and I taught in Mutual. I taught the beehives in Mutual. I liked the fact that there were standards, but some of the things I didn't like is that there were some of the members, which I'm sure in any church, that are disagreeable people, and if the girls had their dresses a little bit too short or something, it wasn't modest, they would come down on them and that sort of thing. That bothered me. I thought, teenagers, they need to be understood. They need to be encouraged. You don't need to put them down. So that was one of the things that bothered me, but that was something that the members themselves would do. I mean, because I remember them saying at one time in Mutual, they had a program, and they said that about 8 girls were dressed, immodestly, like in front of David O. McKay. And they said to him, "What do you think about these ladies?" And he said, "I think they're beautiful. I think they're beautiful young girls." He didn't even remark on the fact that they were dressed inappropriately. So I knew that wasn't from the church. It was just some of the members that were sticklers about dress and so forth.
Let me interject something. I remember coming home often in my teen youth, and seeing you on your knees by the bed. And you guys know my views on religion, but that transcended religion to me. That you would wait up often, or you'd be on your knees and you were worried. And I mean, just to bring it down to a more personal level, as parents, where you would pick me and my friends up wherever we were and give us rides, take me to school, and show up to things. And when things happen within the religion that I personally could not relate to, you always took my side. You didn't take the institution side. In the home, you always took your children's side. And so I learned from that as a young man what was driving you, and your prayer, your praying, and your relying upon God and all that. I mean, was it just internal? Did you just always have that? Did you learn to do that? Did the church teach you to do it? What was it that caused you guys to say, we're not going to make the institution the primary thing? We like it, we're going to support it, we're going to stay in it, especially you. But that you just let God be more of the conduit to your children than church.
Well, with me, when I first joined the church, I felt like everybody was perfect. I thought, oh, gee, this is a perfect religion. Everybody's perfect. And then I soon found out that they weren't. Just different little things that would occur. And, that I just didn't agree with. I think it's just that if I just don't agree with something, I'm not going to go along with it. And I soon found out that the members aren't perfect. The standards, everything that the church teaches is good, it's perfect, but some of them, the way they interpreted it and whatever they did was not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things that I really questioned about was that they had nurseries at that time for you to put your children in. They've done away with all that too for the little babies. They had cribs and everything with babies in them, and you put your kids in when you went to class. And so anyway, I'd put Shannon in there. She was a baby, and when I went to pick her up, she was sucking on someone else's bottle.
Mm.
And she came down with thrush in her mouth. And I thought, no way am I going to put my kids in the nursery anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So then I didn't do it, and I was always said, you could put them in the nursery. No, I don't put them in the nursery. And then when we moved to Huntington Beach, no, who was it that was a baby? It wasn't Huntington Beach because Bo was 2. It must have been still when I was in Whittier and you were a baby and they wanted me to put you in there. And you'd always get croup, and so I wouldn't do that. And they'd even come to the house and say, well, we sterilize the beds and we do this and that. And no, I won't do it. And I would not go along with it. I would not put my kids in the nursery, which was a nursery for little babies, and exchanging, and those people would change their diapers in there and do all of that. I did not agree with that. But that changed,
Sure.
They stopped that. And I think that wasn't a thing that came down from Salt Lake that you had to put babies in the nursery. It was something that they did. And then I even remember moving here and Bridget having small children, babies, and them getting sick, and she posted a notice, put it on the nursery door. It said, if your child is sick, if it has a fever, if it's coughing, if it has a runny nose or a rash, keep it home or don't put it in here.
It's my younger sister.
Yeah, well, it wasn't for long, and I guess someone else posted a response to that, Yeah, but anyway, that was one of the first things that I didn't like about what was going on, was wanting you to put your babies in that nursery and let whoever take care of them. You didn't know what they were going to do with those babies, because there's crazy people in the church and out of the church. So anyway, that. But I don't know if you want me to the good things that I have learned from the church, being an uneducated woman, formally educated, I should say, it gave me opportunities that I never would have had. It gave me purpose and direction in raising my children, and I could differentiate of whether they were being unfair with them or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was given the opportunity to teach. To me, I mean, I was given that opportunity. I was a teacher. And then, I was put in leadership positions. I was over the women as a Relief Society president twice. And that is something for someone who came from my background. So it gave me something. It gave me a source of, I shouldn't say pride, but I guess that is it. It gave me a source of being important.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me an opportunity to serve and to see other people, and especially to see people in the church who were down and out and that needed help and that were maybe ripping the church off, because oftentimes we'd have to go out as Relief Society presidents and take food orders from people, and then you'd have to go down a list and they'd put down what they needed. But we were told we had to look in their cupboards to make sure that they weren't just getting more than they should. That, I didn't like that. I didn't want to look in someone's cupboard and check on them. So I never even did that. I kind of put it on an honor way. But, and being the Relief Society president, I was able to see what the church did as far as the Bishop's Storehouse was concerned. To be able to go in there and see how wonderfully organized and the wonderful food and things that they had for the people.
Mm-hmm.
And all of it was fresh. They had everything that you could imagine, from diapers to feminine products to everything, and wonderful meat and wonderful produce that they changed all the time. It was a wonderful experience to see that. And I'll just interject here that his sister Kathy and her husband were called to be over that Bishop's Storehouse here in San Diego, and were so impressed with all of the food and the things that they had, and now she had been called to serve on an interfaith basis, where all the churches are concerned. It's the food pantry for the San Diego area, and so she's doing that too. And she said, the contrast is what the church provides for people that are in need, and for the people that's come in from off the street is terrible. She said this produce is spoiled, the dates on the cans and everything is expired. She said it's horrible what they're doing with these people, and they have people who are supposed to be running it that don't even come in, and they're dirty and they need help. So, I mean, to me, that is a testimony of the good in the church. Mm-hmm. And as far as anything else, there have been a few times when I haven't liked what the members have done, and especially with my son Shawn. I didn't feel like they treated him fairly. I wasn't stupid, but maybe they did treat you fairly.
They could have. You may have been very fair.
And I stuck up for my baby.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, of course, the other thing, well, I don't know, I should get into your sister Bridget and her marriage, that situation.
No, probably not necessary.
Yeah.
But the thing is, do you draw, and this is a personal question, do you draw a line between church activity and what it's done for you and your service to it and your relationship with God? Is it one and the same, or do you see, when you pass on from this life and stand before God, was the church activity something that you contributed to and benefited from, but your relationship with God is separate, or do you link the two?
I link the two.
Do you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
So we're now going to go, how much time we have, Matt?
55.
We have 5 minutes left. We're going to go to your husband now.
Okay.
And he has, when he was younger, of course, did participate with the faith. He is going to pass on and go before his Maker. You link the two between God, and he has pulled from that. So, do you believe that God will be saying to him, Eddie, cultural hall chairs, you didn't set them up, you could have done that, or do you think he's going to be looking at Eddie's heart?
I think he's going to be looking at Eddie's heart.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, and all the circumstances of his life and everything else.
Everything, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah,
I think, the good it outweighs anything bad he's ever done.
yeah, of course.
And I'm sure that he will. And I don't know, somewhere in the scriptures it says that the non-believer will be sanctified by the believer,
That's
and
right.
he knows that.
That's right. He's a fortunate man. The one thing I want to point out to the audience, wrapping this up with my mom, is when we start to talk, and I want to just kind of give a personal testimony, when it comes to a faithful mother, faithful wife, someone who cooked, served, cleaned, taught, disciplined, supported, all the things that mothers do for their families. I meet a lot of people. She's at the top of the list when it comes to that stuff. And I'm bringing this to your attention because she has some views that may be different than other people's. I want to talk to you about hell. This is one of the reasons I wanted to have my mom on here. There are some people out there that we have engaged with that believe both my mom and my dad, who's going to come on here, are going to burn in hell forever. Now, these are good people. They're going to burn in screaming, agonizing hell forever. One, because she either didn't have the right Jesus, or two, because he didn't embrace the right one. And I want you to seriously think about that claim. Seriously think about it when it comes to your loved ones, your parents who have remained active, or whoever, or haven't remained active. We're trying to break down this BS stuff that we have perpetuated ignorantly toward LDS people, toward Hindus, toward other Christians who don't measure up according to what... This is what Harlem Matter has been about with these interviews. And so I just wanted to, now after she has talked, listen to that life. And still married, and how they've done their damnedest as human beings, and they're gonna burn in hell forever? What kind of God are you talking about? Really? What kind of God? And we have to say, in all fairness, through this interview, she heard of a father who was loving, who gave his only begotten son. He loved us so much, and that is why she joined that religion, and that's why she's been faithful to it. That's the gospel message. What more do you want? All the other stuff, we've always said Mormonism does religion better than anybody else, and they obviously do. But think about this stuff as we wrap it up. Mom, you get to say the final word. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing what you've shared. Anything final word you want to say to the audience?
I want to say that I'm very proud of my son, Shawn. I love him very much. And he's been on a spiritual journey for probably his whole life. And I respect him, and I love him with all my heart.
Love you, Mom. Thanks. Years or attack history of Mormonism, and I'm still, my mom knows, I'm not a supporter of the doctrine, but I'm not a supporter of the doctrine of and practices and leaders and founders of many Christian religions. So what are we going to do? When we show my dad's interview, it's a lot different because he doesn't go through all the young stuff. It's going to be interesting to you. It doesn't go as long because he's going to bring something else to the table that I think you'll find fascinating. And that is a man, I'm telling you, I don't know anyone more honest really. He's got faults, but more honest in my life, or hardworking. A seeker, but not a man of faith. And I just want to throw that out. Jesus, did he have the victory for my dad? Did he have the victory for my mom and your neighbor and my neighbor and our children who are still LDS or who are not following Christ? Did Christ have this victory or did he not? And I think that's what we're just trying to kind of get to with these interviews. Thanks for hanging in with it, and we will see you next week here on Heart of the Matter.
I'm on a ride, going nowhere. I am an existential cowboy on the wind, and I won't be coming out, I'm going in. This man's awake, a storm's arising, the dawn's awaiting till 100 monkeys know. And I can feel the light-filled monkeys start